Greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Some quick updates here. Paxton Lake. There's recent reports. The trail on the west side of the lake. Some people were paced out. A lot of weird noises made at them. No reports of any rocks being thrown. Also up not too far from North Pole. There's some reports. I didn't gain permission to show the photos or whatnot, but I'll get those permissions here soon and update that and whatnot. But anyway, so just be aware there's fresh reports out of North Pole near Fairbanks and also Paxton Lake, which both areas have historically speaking, plenty of reports. But anyway, I just wanted to get those out. So what I wanted to share with you today, we'll name him Jack. He's from the Bristol Bay area. His Uppa left him a cabin many years ago, and when he was a kid, his Uppa would tell him stories about dealing with the hairy man at the cabin, and he would always warn Jack that, hey, when you go to the cabin, be aware, it likes to look in the windows, it likes to bang the cabin, it hasn't taken anything, but watch your fish and stuff like that, right? And so, he believed his Uppa, he just never dealt with it himself. And so after his Uppa passed and, he had access to the cabin, he went there to kind of, relive some memories and check out, what condition it was in, and it was in great condition. So one of the things is his Uppa told him was this one night, this was pre-statehood, his Uppa was in there and he was getting ready to run a trap line. It was wintertime, and he had chosen his route, and he was going in there, hardy, like snowshoe, that kind of stuff, which is work, man, especially with all the snow. But anyway, so he told Jack that on this particular trap line he had to look out, because once you pass this little creek, once you get on the other side of that creek, if you ever set up traps on that side, you'll lose the furs. The hairy man will take them, will thrash your traps and whatnot. And he took that with kind of like a grain of salt, right? Because his Uppa told him that once he went beyond that creek and tried to trap there, the first few sets were excellent. And so he progressed a little further, and it was about the third set that he had made over the course of a couple weeks. All of a sudden, everything was torn to tatters. Every single trap was tripped and broken and busted apart and all this crazy stuff, right? Along with a couple sightings at a distance, screaming, started throwing stuff. His Uppa made his way out of there. This thing had followed him back to the cabin at one point, screaming at him, banging the walls. Tried the door a couple times. His Uppa put a couple shots up into the door jamb to basically make noise, and the thing took off. And he shared with Jack multiple instances of those kind of behaviors coming from this particular group of hairy man, or this hairy man that was past this creek. And so Jack, he kept that in mind when he went there. So when Jack went to this cabin and was sitting there trying to figure out if what he was gonna do, just keep it recreational, maybe trap out of it if the prices were good or whatever. Well, on this particular trip he made, Jack had his wife with them, and she was pregnant at the time. And so they were basically setting things up. It was in the springtime, and that time of year we get a lot of daylight, and so he was very comfortable after a few days going around the cabin. Of course, he always carried a bear gun, because it's friggin' Alaska. It's what it is. Well, he said that he was about 100 yards away from the cabin on this old trail that this particular trail is up, was warning him about. Don't cross the creek because you'll draw it back, right? And so he wasn't really thinking about that warning until he actually had walked past this creek a little ways, remembered what his Uppa told him, and then came back across the creek, milled around the cabin some more and whatnot. And he decided, well, because understand, this creek isn't right next to the cabin. He had initially walked further away from the cabin, crossed this creek, remembered, then came back. And so as he was about 100 yards from the cabin, All of a sudden he seen dark movement back. It was off to the right hand side of what he could see of the cabin. Now it was obscured by trees and everything, and so he said he was looking and he saw a dark shadow moving that was very big. And at first he was like, who in the hell is that? So he starts heading back towards the cabin. Again, he's got approximately 100 yards to cross. It's kind of a mixed bag of terrain. You know, you got the mossy tundra under his feet, all the density of the trees. You know, you got black spruce, birch, willow, alders. And he was making his way back over. And this is before everything fully bloomed and totally obscured all his vision. He said when he got to about just hollering distance from the cabin, he started yelling out, hey, what do you want? What do you want? Because this figure had moved and he's seen it stop behind a little batch of trees back on the backhand side of the cabin, which would, if you're facing the cabin, it'd be off to the left, but he was back off the corner of the right backhand side. He said as he was yelling, this thing moved away. And so he was like, what the hell? And it was big. And so immediately he had the flashbacks of the hairy man warnings and all that from his grandpa. And he was thinking, well, I just crossed that. This thing had to have already been over here, right? It was his thought process at the time. He didn't want to startle his wife, so he goes inside and calmly brings up, hey, you remember all the stories I tell you about my Uppa and, you know, the hairy man stuff? She understood. She was like, yeah, you know, and she of course believed, because there's no reason for this old man to lie to them for nothing, you know. So he explains what he just witnessed and what he saw, and that he had crossed that creek, but it was the time frame, it seemed odd, and he thought maybe it was already watching them or whatever, right? So he warns her, and she asks that he leave a loaded gun with her whenever he goes out of the cabin, which, you know, he already did, but he made it more readily available, just laid on the table there. And so they talked for a little bit, and as they were talking and having this discussion, you know, he watched it move away at a fast clip. So he didn't think it was still in the immediate area. He thought he had scared it off, basically. Well, that wasn't the case. As he was talking to his wife, she's in front of him in a chair, and he's standing, and behind him off his right hand shoulder is this window. And this is broad daylight, you know. It's approximately 10-11 in the morning. And Jack said as he's talking to his wife and she's sitting there looking back at him in his direction, he noticed her eyes just immediately, her whole head turned, and he noticed shadowing from behind with this window. He turns around and looks, and all he sees is just darkness move from in front of the window out of view of the window. There was no figure to make out or anything. It was just darkness, and then, you know, it moved, which it was moving around to the front of the cabin. He said that when that happened, he had this rush of primal fear that made him start shaking immediately, because even his wife said she sensed it, that this thing was there to run them off, like get rid of them, is the feeling they had. I asked if there was anything specific that made him feel that way, and he said it was the energy in the air. He said the energy made him, he immediately felt like out of place, unwelcome, just in all sorts of, he said it was ugly. Okay, so he immediately grabs a rifle. He had just been, you know, showing his wife safety and all that kind of stuff, you know, clicked safety off or whatever, 300 Win Mag. He grabs that rifle, and it was open sights. He flings open the front door and goes out it looking for this thing. He sees nothing. He goes around the cabin. He's really looking, right? He said the whole time he was outside the cabin and going around the little trails around the cabin and looking off in the distance through the brush, he kept feeling like he was being watched, but he couldn't figure out where this presence was, right? Because he could feel it, he just couldn't pinpoint it as he was looking around. Now, as he came from the back side of the cabin towards the front, he heard a weird noise up above him on the roof. And so as he's moving along, he noticed the way the sunlight was hitting the cabin, he could see his shoulder shadow off the edge, the drip edge of this cabin, right? So he's walking along under the drip edge. The sunlight is basically straight above, and the shadow is, the sunlight's hitting, and he could see the shadow of his shoulder running along with the drip line, right? And as he's doing so, he stopped because he noticed this bulbous kind of extension of a shadow popping out. And he said immediately he understood this thing was on the damn roof, and he didn't know how it got there. So he walks to the front. He said he calmly stopped once he got up to the front, turned around and swung the rifle up and started pointing up to the roof and then backing away from the cabin, right? He said as he backed away, he got about 15 feet back and was looking up, and it was approximately 912 pitch roughly on this roof. It was fairly steep. And as he backed up, now understand this roof was old school style. It had like I guess it would be tar paper down on top of some old, a lot of times people use pecker poles and run them, and then they'll, lay down plywood sometimes or whatever they have around, and then tar paper, and then over the tar paper they'll put tundra. They'll stack it up or whatever. That's the style roof he had initially. He ended up changing it, but as he was backing up, looking up the roof, he said he noticed this thing would peek up from the other side of the roof, right? And for the life of him, he said he was struggling to garner the courage to point the rifle in that direction, because he was looking and it would pop its head up and he couldn't make it out, because again, the way the sun was beaming down, it was all silhouette, so all he saw was a dark shape of a head poking up from the opposite side of the ridge of the roof line. He said it freaked him out, and he said, screw this. This thing is literally on the roof. My wife is inside pregnant. I don't know if the roof is going to hold this thing, right? So he immediately runs over to the other side to where he can see the other side of this ridge. And he said when he raised the rifle up, this thing stood up, turned, and leapt off of the roof, kind of tore up patches of it. But when it jumped off, landed in the brush just out of view and took off. He heard it crash, 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 crash. So immediately he runs inside, and his wife had already backed off into the corner, and she said, I heard it grunting when you were walking around the cabin. She said she was too scared to say anything and yell out because she was so petrified. She could hear in just the creaking of its weight adjusting, moving on the roof and all this, right? So he calms her down, says, I ran it off. This thing obviously it comes here a lot. Look, it never did anything to Uppa. It freaked him out a few times, but it never caused him injury. So let's just calm down and figure out what we want to do. Well, obviously she did not want to stay. He said, I understand. Give me a little time here. We'll leave in the morning first thing. I want to just button things up, make sure that this thing doesn't destroy what Uppa left me. And she said, well, she reluctantly agreed. We'll leave it at that. There was a little bit of a back and forth on that. So Jack said once they agreed, he went outside real quick and started putting these boards back over the windows. As he was doing that, as he was banging with a hammer and resetting these things back up, to cover the windows and stuff so bears didn't get in. As he was doing that, off in the distance, as he was banging with the hammer, he would stop and be doing something else, grabbing some more nails or whatever, and he would hear an imitation of that knocking sound, the hammer banging sound, off in the distance. And he said it was the exact same cadence, the exact same pitch, and tempo, everything. It matched. So it was like an echo, but not in real time. It was like, he said it was really mind-boggling, and it kind of intrigued him a little bit, like, what the hell? So he got the one side done, he moves around to the other side, and again, he's bringing the rifle with him, he's leaning against the freaking cabin as he's doing the second window, and he said, bam, something hit this board he was just getting ready to lift very, very hard. He couldn't make it out because whatever hit bounced off and went over his head. And he immediately dropped it, grabbed the rifle, turned around, and started yelling, hey, I'm over here, you're gonna get shot and all this stuff. And I say all this stuff, believe me, it was worse than the sailor. He was cussing up a storm and just yelling out. as this is going on, he starts to hear movement directly in front of him, but it's moving from directly in front of him off to his left. He said it had to have been about 25 yards, and at this particular spot it's moving was the thickest portion of woods, and just so happens the path back to the river runs along right beside this area, right? So he hears it move into that real dense vegetation and treed area, and starts yelling again, "Hey, I hear you over there. I know you're over there. You know, if I see you again, I'm gonna shoot you. You need to leave." And it was just dead quiet, you know. So he said his piece. He goes back over, and he's having a really hard time turning his back to those trees. So he goes and gets the wife, says, "Hey, I need your help. I just need you to keep an eye out with the rifle when my back's turned, and keep an eye out over here." And she, again, reluctantly agreed. She comes outside and she's holding the rifle. He does his thing, uneventful. They go back inside. Now, their only view outside is with the door open. The windows, the two windows that are in this cabin are now covered. They're inside. She had lit this lamp together, all this stuff, because it was dark inside, and even with the door open, it only let so much light in. The corners were still dark, and she had to get in drawers and stuff like that, right? So they're doing their thing, collecting their stuff, and as that's happening, he had left the door open, and he's kind of more paying attention to the open door, waiting to see if there's any shadow movements or anything like that. And as that was going on, and she's getting stuff loaded up or into, you know, packed back up into their totes and stuff, bam, the whole place shakes, and he could tell that this thing had just hit the board he put up on that side of the cabin, which if you're facing the cabin straight on, it would be off to the left hand side, the same side that the trees are, that this thing paced over into, and he could hear it over there, right? And so immediately he's like, screw this thing is, you know, whatever's going on, it's not stopping. So he goes outside with the rifle to that side, and as he's looking again, all of a sudden he notices a shadow. This thing got up on the roof again, and they didn't hear it. You know, they didn't hear a weight shift, a creak, or any of that stuff. And typically you would think something that heavy, you get up on the roof, it's gonna you're gonna hear, you know, the weight distribution. None of that was heard. This thing was just up there, and he saw its shadow again, right? So immediately he backs away from the cabin, raises his rifle, and again it jumps off the back. He runs around the back and shoots a shot. Boom! Fires off in that direction. It's dead quiet. He's got ringing going on in his ears now, and he's having a hard time hearing, but he's not hearing movement along with the ring, right? Nothing loud enough to like overcome that ringing in his ear at the moment. And as he's doing so, his wife screamed when she heard the shot. You know what I mean? Because once he raised the rifle, then there was obvious movement on the roof that you could hear, feel, see, and all that, right? So she screams after he lets off the shot. He's looking, he's not hearing anything, and he gets really wigged out, gives back inside. And as he's sitting there talking to his wife, she tells him, how does it keep getting on the roof? How does it do that? And again, they have no clue. The roof line itself at the back side is probably at the drip edge, probably 6-7 foot off the ground. Up at the front's probably 9 foot, right? Because it kind of sat at a little bit of a slope. And they're trying to figure out how this thing quietly got up there. But at that point, his wife was over the debate. She's not going to stay until morning. She's not staying any longer. Excuse me. She's ready to go. He agrees. Tells her, hey, we'll do this loading up together. So what they did is, next to the cabin there was an old sled for a snow machine sled, right? And it was on runners and stuff. It was old. It was older style, more like a toboggan, kind of like a work sled where you can put a bunch of heavy stuff on there and strap it down. It didn't really have sideboards or anything like that. It was just kind of like a flat freight sled, you know. And it was pretty heavy, and they decided they're going to put as much stuff on there and help drag it to make as few trips as possible back and forth for their stuff. Now, they didn't have a whole lot of stuff, but what they had was detrimental items that they brought from home, right? That his wife, you know, we'll bring our blankets, we'll bring this. She brought a bunch of stuff because she didn't know what condition the cabin was in or what was there. and just so happened they needed that stuff back at home as well. So she was more concerned about that. And you know, it got to a point where they're loading up this sled, getting ready to help each other drag it, you know, and just do it like that. As soon as they got everything out, he buttoned up the rest of the cabin, he nailed the door shut, put the padlock on it, and he didn't go up onto the roof to take the chimney stack down and put a coffee can over it. None of that. He decided he'd do that later. As they dragged this sled, they're going by that thick batch of trees where he heard this thing pace over, just, you know, after the thing threw whatever at the cabin when he was putting up the board. So when they get to that area, they were both pretty spooked, and he kept stopping and dropping, because it was basically a tongue that would attach to the snow machine or whatever, or to a tow line or whatnot, right? So it was basically, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's kind of like A-frame shaped, and it's on hinges, you know, to where it can attach, and then, you know, as the sled's going over bumps, it can articulate and do its thing. They're dragging it by that. Every once in a while he would drop it, bring the rifle up, because he's using one hand, carrying the rifle with the other. He'd drop it, grab the rifle, and point in that direction, because they kept feeling watched, like they're being watched real heavy, and they kept hearing stuff, but they couldn't make it out. He chalked it up to paranoia, right? And finally he was like, okay, after like 2 or 3 times within 10 feet of doing that, he goes, let's go. And he was keeping his wife away from the wooded side where this noise was coming from. He couldn't pinpoint how far in there or none of that. He said he was on the verge of like just being hyper emotional, because he had his wife there. He was worried about her safety and just this weird shit happening, right? He said they made a hard effort, just drag. They got within about 40 yards, you know, of where the boat was tied off, and they figured that was good enough. What he was gonna do is have his wife stay over by the edge of the riverbank where the skiff was tied up, stand there with the rifle as he made the trips back and forth from the sled. As he was doing that, trying to be as quick as he can, because he was bringing the stuff over, immediately jumping down, putting it into the skiff, just immediately packing it, instead of staging it there and then packing it into the skiff. He was just doing it all at once. He said he was just going over to the sled for the last little bit of stuff left on there, and he was gonna flip the sled over and tip it over. And he gets over there, he grabs he said it was a little more than a handful of stuff. It was basically a little day bag and a sweater and something else. He threw it over one arm and was trying to lift this sled with one hand and flip it over, and it wasn't working. So he said screw it. He turns around, starts walking back. He said he was about 20 feet from his wife, and she had knelt down on one knee and started raising the rifle, and so he started moving out of her line of sight and kind of slowly looking over his shoulder. He said when he looked back just past the sled, and he's not far from it, so from his vantage point this is like 20-25 feet, there's some alder shrubs there. This thing was squatted down and was kind of pushing his hand, using his hand to push the brush down a little bit and do this number. It would raise its hand, push the brush, lift up, and then do this. It was doing it like at a regular cadence, he said it was like every 2 seconds it was doing that. Told his wife, hold your fire. If it comes at me, shoot. If not, just keep an aim on it or whatever. He gets up to his wife, takes the rifle from her. He looks back, and it's still doing the same thing. He tells her to untie, get in the skiff, right? Had her fire up the skiff. They're letting it warm up a little bit as he's standing there. He's keeping an eye on this thing, and it's not doing anything overtly aggressive. It's just kind of putting its hand up, pushing down the brush, peeking over, and then doing this number over and over and over. He said it seemed like it didn't know what it wanted to do, like it was unsure of itself. That's the energy. He said it just felt real weird, like something was uncertain going on. So it's warmed up enough now, and he's having a hard time turning his back on this thing. So what he does is he does like he would a bear. He tries to make himself bigger, starts screaming, hey, you just get back. His wife's telling him, get the hell in the boat, let's go. He's like, it's right there, I'm scared to turn my back on it. And she was like, okay, well, shoot it. Which, hey, I'm with his wife, shoot that mother. you know, pop his ass. So instead of doing that, he does this gonna scare you away thing again, right? Which it did not work. The second time he did it, this thing was just putting his hand up and peeking up when he did that the second time, and then it just stood up. He said the brush itself was about 6-7 foot, not all that overly large, but he said when it stood up and he could see its real height, like because before he was guesstimating at a distance, he could tell it was big. The shadow was big. When it jumped off the roof, he could tell it was big, but he had no reference of it standing still to garner its size, right? And he said it had to have been 11-12 foot tall because of how much he said it just seemed like it kept rising and rising and rising. Yeah. Anyway, so immediately he's like, oh shit. He jumps down, he pushes off, she gets out of the way, takes the rifle from him, he gets into the back, backs out. They circle around and they're looking back at shore and they see nothing. They go upriver a little ways, and because this particular channel, it was just the way he had backed away and was paying attention, he wasn't going the right direction initially, so he started going upriver, and it dawned on him a little ways up. He turns around, comes back, and as he was going back by, he told his wife, you know, keep your eye out in case it's standing there or whatever, you know, just in case. Well, as they're coming back around the slight bend to where they can see their little landing area, they see that toboggan, that freight sled, just flinging right on through the air, just kabloosh into the water. He said that sled was heavy. It was hard to drag. It was at least a couple 100 pounds, and it was flung like nothing, you know, just absolutely nothing. He said the way it hit in the river, it hit real near a little gravel bar area, so when it kind of hit and stuck a little bit and then dropped down and then kind of tried to float. So he figured, hey, it'll drift down somewhere, you know. He wasn't going to stop in that moment. And they kept going, and he was looking back up at the riverbank trying to see if they could see it, you know, if it was standing out in the open or anything anymore. And they didn't see anything, and they just got the hell out of there. I'm going to thank Jack for reaching out. There's some things with his Uppas stories and stuff that I'll share at a later time. Again, Paxton Lake, if you guys are going out fall hiking or whatever, that west trail, there's fresh reports of being paced, strange noises. And again, I'll try to get more definite information about the North Pole area where another person had some stuff going on, so I'll try to get you guys a little better information on that. I want to thank Jack for sharing. It's much appreciated, and we will catch you guys on the next one.